Welcome to CNBC Africa Focus On from Africa Food Systems Summit here in Kigali, Rwanda at KCC. And we're joined by two extremely wonderful panelists, Ahmad Pathe Sene, the Managing Director at Africa Food Systems Summit, as well as Nadine Gabosa, the Director of Food Systems at IFAD. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Now, Mr. Pathe, let me start with you. Every year, the summit has a theme to it. What's the theme this time and what's the idea behind it?
This year is quite special because the theme has been around youth and also women. And that theme is innovate, accelerate, and scale, delivering food system in a digital and climate era. So this is at the center of the discussion. We can scale up our work, but at the same time also we can bring the innovation and unleash the potential of young people around food system transformation, particularly when our world is hit hard by the climate change. So most of our guests who are coming are most welcome to debate for this week, but also give direction and take opportunity to transform and accelerate this agenda on the continent.
Right, transform, innovate, accelerate. Now all of those things sound like they require money. That's where people like you come in, Nadine, and your expertise. Where do we stand today since these forums have begun, since these discussions have actually begun about securing the entire food value chain? Where do we stand today in terms of finance? How would you objectively say is the situation in Africa?
What we would say, financing, if you don't finance, you cannot see change. So basically financing is at the heart of the change. And this is why together with the World Bank, IFAD have been working to keep track of the financing. How much money is going into food system? Where is the money going? Who is it targeting? Is it bringing change? If we don't have a base to start with, how can we measure progress in financing to food systems? The starting point for African country was 10 years ago, the Malabo commitment, committing to put 10% of their budget minimum of 10% of their budget into agriculture. I looked at the African Union's last report in 2024, and it basically says that African countries made tremendous efforts, but none of the countries reporting actually met that target. And this is where we start now looking into the post-Malabo agenda. What we see is that in the context of shocks and crises, African countries are challenged with their domestic resource to finance food system transformation. The advice, the way we work with them, is that it has to be complementary funding between three sources. The efforts of the government with their domestic budget, the support of the development partners is extremely important to complement the efforts at the national level. And thirdly, the big elephant in the room is to mobilize private sector investment and also making it available to the small and medium enterprises in Africa. And this is not yet at the scale and scope we need, but we are moving forward.
Taking that back, the 10% question, you say that African countries did put aside certain budgets, bigger budgets, slightly inflated or more inflated, towards food system development. But at the same time, the same reports do also point out that it wasn't enough, and actually the mark of 10% was most like, as an average, wasn't reached. Now, if this is a question for you, Mr. Pathe, at the same time, African nations are struggling with debt, a lot of debt pressures. So in that situation, how do organizations like yourself, because you advise governments, how do you tell them how to put aside money for improving their food systems when budgets as it is are so restrained?
It's a good question, and I think that African debt also for African leaders which are gathering in this Africa Food System Forum is in many cases the word is not fair. The way they are rated, the risk, the interest rate is quite high compared to the rest of the world because the perceived risk of the continent, which is not bigger than anywhere else, so risks are everywhere. But still, investment are coming on the continent. So at the end of the day, so that interest rate will add also another kind of debt on those continents. So I think there is this review of the financial architecture, which has been a call for from African leaders to look at also the debt framework. That's number one, and I think it's a fair call. The second is also, I think outside, you have concessional resource. We have also a certain structuring deals that should be done in a way that it's not, again, adding more debt, but just showing Africa as a land of opportunities. And those concessional resources and all opportunities could also come from the capital market, and capital market from private sector, but also climate finance, philanthropy, to just de-risk and create that blended finance, which will help us to improve the production, but also the income, and to be able also to deal with the debt side. So it's a reality, but there is also another wise way and a smart way to work with when you are constrained with this reality and the complexity.
Right. What options do exist today when it comes to empowering the entire value chain, some of which requires heavy capital, heavy investment, heavy infrastructure development, and some of it actually could be very significant improvement in people's life through very small, what you call microfinance. Speak a little bit about that to us.
Yes. I will start by saying that how do you influence government to shift money which is scarce to the agri-food systems? I'd like to contribute to that answer to say the African Union came with the figure that by 2030, African agribusiness will be worth 1 trillion. And that basically just the urban food market will be about 150 billion. So basically what it means is that companies are positioning themselves on the African market. This is huge. And as you mentioned, how do we ensure that African people capture, and the youth and the women capture a share of this huge market coming up? And this is where you see the opportunity for government in basically in terms of income, in terms of job creation, in terms of business, employment opportunities, also for the small producers, processors, traders operating in there, which are in agri-food value chains, which actually live in poverty. So are we going to leave this to the outside to basically reap the benefits, or are we going to empower the people of Africa to capture this huge market as small, medium, large companies are positioning themselves on the market? So there are different solutions. Basically, as Pate was saying, is basically the governments, yes, they're under debt distress, but the investors market is becoming important in Africa. And I'm talking about social investment, sustainable bonds, where basically it's becoming a huge source of money because the market is there. We are also, as IFAD, working on financing solutions for what we call micro, small, and medium agri-food businesses in Africa, which are most of the time informal. 90% of them do not have access to finance to scale up the business. So basically, as you were mentioning, providing them with financing solution that they can access, because we cannot have 90% of them not accessing finance to step up the business. In terms of climate, we also see that the climate financing, to give you a figure, only 1.7% of climate financing reach the micro, small, medium, and enterprise agri-food business in Africa. Yes, they are the most affected by that. So the solution also include climate finance, meaning insurance, also investing in technologies, investing in drought resistance inputs. So this is the kind of package that we are coming from to address the different needs from government to the small scale level, so that this 1 trillion agribusiness coming up is also seized by the African men, women, youth of tomorrow.
I want to take both of your comments one by one. What do you think should be all African countries' approach this time when going for the 29th COP?
I think the loss and damage fund is still a good idea that was set, but now it has to be operationalized and quickly, because we're talking about action. And so obviously those kind of replenishment of funds is always complex. To set it up is complex. The bureaucracy to make it work is complex. So, but I think, you know, it's there. It has to be operationalized as are the other green funds that are already there, but also simple, agile to make sure that countries can tap into it and address very quickly their challenges. So I think right now it's just a matter of urgency, making sure that mechanisms are flexible, rapid, and then this is also working for the countries that may be hit hard by any disaster, so they can react properly.
I would say the approach has to be consistent, has to be the same. These are not issues that are solved from one year to the other, basically. So what I would say the approach is consistency, persistence, and determination. And the African is coming united on this position. And as we say, united we stand, divided we fall. So I think we need to continue with the persistence and the determination to have the global community to address this. I was listening to the news this morning, and the report of the World Meteorological Organization came out in these days, and basically say that 30% of the climate-related deaths are happening in Africa. The panel on the International Panel on Climate Change indicated that agricultural productivity in Africa has reduced by 30% due to climate change since 1960. So I think evidence speaks. The facts speaks for this. The facts speaks for themselves, and we can't let this go. That today Africa is bearing the brunt of the climate change, and our food systems are dreadily affected in terms of death, in terms of loss of productivity, in terms of, you see the drought and the floods that are happening and ravaging Africa. So I think the loss and damage argument and the collective responsibility for what is happening is not a vain request, and we can't let it go. It has to happen.
And that, Nadine Gabosa, talking about interoperability, improving that, exchange, knowledge, technology, interventions when it comes to policy and for global financial frameworks. All of that under one roof here at KCC in Kigali at the Africa Food Systems Forum on a special CNBC Africa special focus on with Ahmad Pathe, the Managing Director of Africa Food Systems, and Nadine Gabosa, the Director of Food Systems at IFAD.